Hey folks, Jeff Salzman here, and welcome to the Daily Evolver. Today I am joined by one of my dear old friends in the integral community, Michael Zimmerman. Hey Michael, how you doing?
I'm well. How are you, Jeff? Thanks for having me on today.
My pleasure. Michael, you and I was thinking back, I think we met in the early, maybe 2004, 2005, at the original Integral Institute seminars where you came and taught. And I remember we just loved you. You know, this was this sort of collection of all of the people on Ken Wilber's Rolodex, you know, and we'd have these seminars that were kind of think tanks. And so, yeah, that's where we first got together.
Well, it's been great living in Boulder because you have not only Jeff, but also Steve McIntosh and
right.
Integral players. So it's been a good spot for me in that way.
Yeah, right on. So you've been teaching as a professor of philosophy, Tulane, CU here in Boulder for the past several years, and now you're retired, right? And you know, it just sort of reminds me that I'd love to talk to you just about academic life at some point, but we have another topic today. And it's also really interesting, and I've loved talking to you about this over the years. And it's the topic of artificial intelligence. And so I guess I just start by asking you to just sort of set the lay of the land of artificial intelligence. It's a topic that's of interest to a lot of people who are evolutionaries. I mean, we can see it coming online. We can see that in many ways it's already here. And you make some really, I think, interesting distinctions that help me to get the lay of the land. So why don't you just start there?
That sounds good. Well, you know, I've been doing what's called philosophy of technology for about 40 years. And 10 years ago, I came across Ray Kurzweil's book, The Singularity is Near. That is like the end is near, the singularity is near. Now, what he means by that is that moment in the future when artificial intelligence becomes as smart as human beings and then starts to redesign itself so it rapidly becomes millions of times more intelligent. And that future, he claims, is in the offing. He thinks we'll have computers with human intelligence capacity in about 12 or 14 years. Now, I want to mention something about this guy, Ray Kurzweil. He is director of engineering at Google, and he's a world-famous inventor, won many awards and prizes, MIT grad, super smart guy. And he believes that we are going to merge with our computer and become superhuman in some way.
Yeah. Well, you know, let me just lay out my first sort of objection. Not if it's an objection. I think that's true in the sense that we will create machines that are smarter than human beings. We already have. My phone's smarter than I am. In the terms of aggregating facts and information, smarter than I am. But I don't care how many times more, transistors that you put into that sort of thing, it's not going to have a shred of consciousness or soul.
Well, that's
and so that's the, I think that's a materialist's view of how it's going to happen, but I'm not sure it's an integral view. You've knocked me off this pedestal before, and I'm trying to remember how, so I'll give you that challenge again.
Well, let's philosophers always like to start by saying, well, let's make a distinction.
All right.
Right away, that distracts attention from the problem. Get my act together.
A good trick.
Yeah. So the distinction is between artificial intelligence, which we already have. Look at that smartphone. Billions of times more powerful than computers from back in the 60s. Billions. Think about that. Now, so we already have artificial intelligence all over the place. For example, the artificial intelligence that beat AlphaGo, the Alphago machine that beat the champion of Go. This is the famous old Chinese board game. Computer specialists thought this wouldn't happen for at least a decade, but it happened last year. Now get this. AlphaGo has given rise to its successor, AlphaGo Zero, which taught itself from scratch how to play and played thousands, millions of games with itself. In a competition between AlphaGo and AlphaGo Zero, AlphaGo Zero won 100 out of 100 games. This is a year later.
Wow.
That's all right. So, but even then, no matter how smart that AlphaGo Zero is in terms of playing this game, it's not conscious.
Right. That's right.
That's right. Not yet. But here's what, this is the big kahuna. Now, the more you read about what these Silicon Valley people say, and they put it out there, it's not.
They're all materialists. They don't get the distinction.
No, that's right.
But this other distinction between interiority and, stuff
right.
out in the exteriors.
That's what they want. They want to create what's called artificial general intelligence.
Okay.
Now, so there's AI, which is artificial intelligence, then AGI, artificial general intelligence. What's that? Well, artificial intelligence is always focused on a particular activity, playing Go, or doing something with your bank account, or Facebook or something.
Right.
But they have no further mission. That's because the algorithms are all dedicated. Now, what can a human being do? I mean, an ordinary human being learns to speak, can learn to play a musical instrument, can find his or her way across town on a bus, can learn mathematics. We do all kind of stuff. We have general intelligence. Now, that's the big kahuna. If you can create a computer that has general intelligence, which would require the ability for that computer to reflect upon itself and its own operations, and to check on how it's doing and to assess itself, then you might have the makings of some sort of interiority. Now, we don't know that yet, but that's really the question. Can that occur? Now, think about it this way. I know this is the big sticking point, interiority. What would it be like to be a computer that's self-conscious? Well, Ken Wilber has talked about this. I've talked about this with him. He says, imagine being uploading your consciousness into a computer that has no body. That would be, he said that he can't imagine any more horrifying. Because everything we know about consciousness from our interiority is embodied.
Right.
But unless you have an embodied robotic presence, which is capable of sensing and so on, so there's a lot of stuff that has to be done before we do something mirror.
Well, and Michael, can't we also make the distinction between a, sort of from scratch machine versus augmented intelligence, where it's something we're plugging into the human being, some sort of a implant or a machine or whatever.
We're doing it with our smartphones. It just isn't hooked in yet.
Well, thank you.
But Ray Kurzweil says, and the other people say, it's just a matter of time before the chip's going.
Well, that's different then. If to the degree that we're augmenting our own consciousness, that our human interiority is online. So as long as we live in our little biological sacks of meat. Right.
Well, this is kind of Ray Kurzweil's vision, that we increasingly merge with the computers that we're building, but the question comes up: what would a vastly augmented, techno-human be like? I mean,
no, I think that's what's we're online. That's going to come.
Could we even talk to such a being? I mean, what would we have in common in terms of, just think about our limitations? I mean, being able to do two things at once. And multitasking is overrated. If you may be able to do two things at once, but 3 or 4 things, get out of here. But a really powerful computer can do, an AGI computer can do all kinds of things at once.
Right.
And now think about it this way. One way people have talked about consciousness is like a desktop. All right. In other words, what's in front of you is the stuff on your desktop. That's what you have in mind. Like, I got to call up what's your name, right? Oh no, I should have done, so these things are showing up on the desktop, but you can only do a couple of them. But what if you could do 20 at once and keep track of how they're relating to each other as you're completing one task and setting up an appointment, and all the things are happening at once?
Mm-hmm.
What would it be like to experience that?
Mm-hmm.
Now, we could ask the question, I suppose, what would it mean to move from a cat consciousness? I have a cat. And cat, which is an advanced mammal, to just an ordinary human being. What would the poor cat, what would it make of it all, right? Jump ship. There's cat interiority.
Yeah.
And there's, but what would it be? So what would it be like for us really to be augmented?
Right. Well, I think there's some insight that we can gain by looking at how we are related to our great-great-grandparents, or, even further back, where life really was pretty simple. I mean, there was only so much to know. This, even back before the printing press and so forth, people didn't have a whole lot going on in terms of their, compared to what we hold in our minds. Compared to the number of people the places we've been, the number of people that we know, and now augmented by social media, and we're still in one piece.
Yeah.
But fraying at the edges here. I mean, it's been interesting to see that. Well, what were you going to say? I was just going to say that this turn in consciousness about social media and realizing from the Russia political thing to just the basic shallowizing of mind, that it's not altogether a good thing, and we have to look at it. And that sort of feels new in the last year or so.
Yeah, well, part of it is we're unleashing technological capacities that enable new forms of relationship that we don't yet understand. Like, Zuckerberg, Facebook said, well, no, Russians couldn't be doing that. And later, he found out, they were doing that.
Right, exactly.
That he was shocked, as well as was his one of his chief operating officers. So everyone who's unleashing these new capacities, over which, no one votes on these. They show up in the marketplace.
I know.
And they cause immense disruption.
Yes. Well, and this there was an article written by one of the engineers at Facebook, and he was just talking about, what we're trying to do is keep you clicking. It's a little bit like this colossal B.F. Skinner pigeon thing, and they're good at it. Of course they are. They know exactly what makes that happen in this little shot of dopamine that we keep getting, and of course it's in service of eyeballs on their advertisers. It's their motivation is
how they make money is through attention.
Yeah,
getting our attention to a certain site, whatever it might be. And you're right; they're brilliant at doing that.
Yeah. To
the extent to which we enable it by staying online and doing all this kind of stuff, they just get better at it.
Yeah.
When you think about Google, this home assistant they have. Right? I forget what the name of it is. There's, Amazon has one and Google. Well, they're tracking all that information. All that information is going to Google.
Right.
They're figuring out how humans talk and interact and so on. It's all going into, okay, but let's stop for a minute, because one of the big obstacles for us to understand what's coming is that we tend to think of change in linear terms. Now, listen to this. I was watching one of Ray Kurzweil's broadcasts. He speaks all over the world. This guy can multitask, okay? So he gives us an example. You remember about 20 years ago, they were trying to crack the human genome. They're trying to map the DNA that structures a human being. Now, most scientists said it'll take at least a century to do this because it was so complicated. So after about 7 years, they got to 1% of the human genome. Now, if you were to do a linear, if you were to extrapolate, it would take 700 years to get all 100%. Now, most people figure it'd take sooner than that, 100 years. Hey, come on. But it was all done in 15 years. And this is what Kurzweil said. As soon as they got to 1%, I knew it was almost done. Why? He said because they had been doubling every year.
Yeah.
What they were able to get.
Right.
So now figure it out. If you double 1%, it's 2, then 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128.
Yeah.
So within 7 years, they had gotten all the rest of it. That is a wholly different kind of change. That's exponential change.
Yeah.
That's what we're faced with.
So what are we going to do, Michael?
Well, look, here's the thing. You have people all over the planet, scientists and engineers and entrepreneurs in China now and in Korea, of course, the United States, Europe, Canada, Mexico. They're all feverishly working on these projects. And the computing power, this is called Moore's Law, has been doubling every 2 years for about 50 years. That's what Kurzweil was referring to in the late 60s when he was at MIT. Got to occasionally would get a little bit of time on the mainframe computer, as they call it. This cell phone, I have an old Apple phone, billions of times more powerful because for 50 years there's been a doubling of the amount of number of transistors you can get into a chip space.
Yeah.
It's increasingly miniaturized. So all these domains in which people operate, whether it's law or medicine, whether it's media or, for that matter, university education they are all going to be tremendously buffeted by what's coming. Think about what happened to the news organizations with the advent of online journalism. I mean, newspapers, these are very old and important institutions in the United States and elsewhere, folding, over the past 10 or 15 years.
Yeah.
And think about what's happened to medicine. They now have programs which can do a much better job of detecting cancer in terms of slides or whatever is sent to them for examination than a regular, very trained doctor. So at what point just replace those doctors who are the experts in detecting cells and just say, well, let's let the computers do it?
Yeah.
Is there any white-collar job safe? That's
Right.
the question today.
Well, I mean, I think we can sort of envision a future where everything's sort of taken care of for us, at least on the material plane. So, resources and making stuff and the factories are all robotized and we don't have to work for a living anymore in that way. But that's a radical new organization of society. And it's going to be a bumpy road to get there, but I don't think we could say that that's necessarily a bad thing.
Well, it has to do, let's look at it this way. We are experiencing a period of amnesia because of the rapidity of change. I mean, who's 20 years old remembers a physical letter, receiving a letter, right? Mm-hmm. Or remembers a time when there wasn't Facebook or a computer or a smartphone. I mean, the whole time, let's think about it this way. What was subjectivity, interiority like pre-personal computer and pre-email and then
Well, you and I remember that.
Well, that's right. It's like there's an analogy here. It's called environmental amnesia. And this is postulated by a really good environmental psychologist a number of years ago. Kids growing up today have no recollection of what the land used to look like before all those houses were built. But we do, people who are 40, 50, 60, 70. Like I live here in Boulder. The first time I came out here 25 years ago, there wasn't anything between Boulder and Denver. I mean, Boulder was 25 miles out in the country.
Sagebrush.
Now, yeah, it's totally lined. I mean, and this is just mushrooming. Now, so there's also the interior domain. There's a kind of amnesia, of forgetting, because you never experienced it. Mm-hmm. So that cultural aspects that are so important to interiority are increasingly undermined because of the nature of the technology which possesses us as much as vice versa. Yeah.
I mean, I can see it in myself. I can go back to the pre-computer days. I built my businesses. We didn't have email when I sold my business in 1995. It's astonishing to me, but it's true. And I don't remember it feeling that much different, but I could look at a couple markers. One of them is I don't read novels anymore. I every now and then I'll read a novel, but it's very difficult for me. And but here's what's happening. I'm getting hip to the idea that I don't want to read novels on screens. I want to read novels in actual books. So me and a lot of other people, yeah, there you go, exactly. Me and a lot of other people, because the sale of actual physical books is increasing as a percentage of book sales.
Right, the ebooks are going down.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not sure that we're not going to, it's almost like that this sort of information explosion where all of a sudden all information is available to us is a little bit analogous to junk food. It's like all of a sudden the hunt for calories is over, everybody. You know, we have all the calories we need, and let's have 4,000 and 5,000 of them a day. You know, it's so easy. And then we all get unhealthy and fat, and then we sort of get hip, and we sort of wake up and say, wait a second, that's not good. That's not healthy. And I think there's a reaction against the tech world that, you know, we're seeing in culture, but I think we're particularly seeing it, I was going to say among the younger generation, but forget it. I mean, they're glued to their screens.
Well, you know,
I don't know. I mean, we're going to have to get hip to this because we can only get so shallow.
But I think but the question is, do we have time to get hip? That's what this exponential change is about. All right, that's where it's extremely difficult to wrap your mind around this. Now, Kurzweil, he's a key player in all this, not only because of his position at Google, but because of the things he's written about.
Oh, no, he's legendary in his own time.
And because he's a brilliant futurist. He has made incredible predictions about when things are going to roll out. For example, he predicted the year that Big Blue would beat Kasparov in chess in 1997. And he's made a number of other predictions. It's about 90% accurate. And so he's predicting we'll have a computer, a desktop computer with the computing power of a human brain in about 12 or 14 years. And it'll be able,
but it'll have 0%.
Well, but that's all right. That's all right. That's going to come. And that may well come from the blending of human.
Yeah. Well, the blending I get.
And so, but remember this, but that's this whole interiority thing is so complicated. Of course, it's heart of the matter.
It is, yes.
This, I think, is how this gets us into so many. But look, this is the thing.
I mean, you could have an infinite heap of exteriors, and it's not going to have a shred of interiors.
Now, remember, though, okay, everything has interiority. Including
the atoms do, yes.
Molecules do.
Yes.
Okay, so at what point could non-carbon-based, non-fleshy molecules acquire a kind of openness, a kind of self-awareness?
Oh, God, Michael.
Well, I'm just asking it. This is. I
mean, maybe. I don't. You're scaring me now.
Well, no, but that's what we're faced with. Look, all this money people are making on smart. These what the Google and Apple and these people are doing with that money. Do you think they do it with smartphones? The cash is going to serious stuff like AGI. They want to be the ones to create a machine-like human consciousness. That's the big deal. I mean, it's like, this fires their rockets more than anything else. And many of them are scared witless.
Well, Elon Musk talks about the killer robots or something.
The killer robots. We talk about that in a few minutes. It's just horrifying. Did you watch that video?
No.
Slaughter bots. Just Google it.
Slaughter bots.
Slaughter bots. It was, now look, this gets us into all kind of other stuff, but you might as well mention it. Talk about it for a minute. I just came across this a couple of days ago. It's a film, it's a video, very sophisticated. It starts out with kind of a Steve Jobs character up in front of a big room showing off the latest technology. What the latest technology are bots, or I should say drone bots about the size of like a cupcake or something. And they are, because of miniaturization, they have incredible computing power. And they have tremendous facial recognition capacity. So they can be turned loose, penetrate glass, they can explode right through glass, find the face they want, and put a charge right through the forehead, which blows the brain up. And
that's efficient.
Oh, yeah. And they were showing about how you could release thousands of them, each of which has a target, and each of which, they're like Terminators. They won't stop until they get their victim. Okay.
How are we going to keep this technology out of pre-modern hands?
Oh, of course.
Delighted to use it to, kill the infidels.
On the other hand, think about, remember in Uganda and Rwanda where they had all that trouble in the 90s? In 3 months, like 300,000 people were killed with machetes and stuff. So, some guy in Las Vegas with some guns kills 50 and wounds 500. So it's not like we can't.
Well, I have this sort of theory that, as these things get so advanced, you have to have a certain, technical ability to deploy them. But
Right.
That's not necessarily true. And that's certainly, anybody could take a dirty bomb in a knapsack and go and pull the ripcord.
Sure. Right.
It's.
The point is that now the guy who put this together, Stuart Russell, he's a very famous University of California, Berkeley computer scientist with bunches of books, including maybe the best-selling textbook on artificial intelligence. Like he's the man in some ways in the academy, and he was the one who helped produce this. Now it was put out by, let me get this right, by the see if I can find it here. Yeah, the video was released this month by the Future of Life Institute, which was funded by Stephen Hawking and Elon Musk, because $1 billion or something.
Wow.
Because they're so concerned about the potential wrong turns that AGI could take. Think about it this way, just as we didn't anticipate this Facebook thing, there's a lot of stuff we don't anticipate about what we're unleashing. Now, here's one of the reasons. Because of the exponential growth, we can hardly even begin to grapple with the first stage of it when suddenly it's morphed into something new. It's like this Alphago, which beat the Go champion. Well, a year later, it's being beat 100-0 by the next generation in 1 year. Right. That's the speed with which this stuff's going to unfold. We don't really have time to alter our individual subjectivity or cultural norms or economic structures to take into account the massive, rapid change that's coming on us. That, I think, is the message of these people. Let me give you another example about this, just to give you a sense of what's possible now that no one could have imagined. I can't imagine 10 years ago anything like this. A couple of years ago, I read in Wired magazine. I highly recommend Wired. It's a way to keep up on things. You get it online. I get the physical copy too. But they had a story in there about some Japanese Google guy working in Tokyo on Google Translate. And one morning he woke up and he found that the translating was much better. Now, he had no idea why, but these translating programs are constantly improving themselves.
From one language to the other, translation. I've used them.
Yeah, they're doing this deep learning, so they're coaching themselves. They're constantly getting refinements. All right, so I read this and I said, okay, I'll try it out. Now, I study German philosophy. I can read German. All right, Heidegger, Marx, Nietzsche, all these people. So I type a big fat paragraph of German from Heidegger, into Google Translate, hit the button, and 1 second later, a very good translation shows up. I was astonished.
It wasn't just word salad?
It was good. Now, there's a few refinements because it wasn't quite clear how this technical term might be used. But anyway, I could make perfect sense of it. Now, it's unbelievable. Now, again, the machine isn't conscious of doing it, but the capacity of a computer to interpret, translate natural language like that, we are in a domain that is unparalleled in human history.
Yeah, and that seems to be sort of uncomplicatedly good. Why not communicate?
Yeah. But again, all that's fine. But remember, all of these people who work in these industries, they're all about exponential growth.
Right.
No one's sitting still.
Right.
So every day, new things are coming on. Now, you can imagine, by the way, when I looked at this everyone should Google slaughter bots. If you're willing to see 7 minutes, one of the things they built into it was U.S. senators being targeted in Congress.
Oh, really?
Taken down by the bots.
Wow.
Just to point out, it doesn't matter how many guards, they can't stop that bot from getting
right. Yeah.
The size of a bird moving so fast.
Right.
So they took this to the UN and they showed it to the senators and stuff. So the point being, they want to stop some of this research. But I went to there's another, you wouldn't believe what's out there in the defense industry. Here's another one called from Duke Robotics. Just look up Duke Robotics. They have a video called No Boots on the Ground. And it shows these drones carrying, high-powered submachine guns. And they're flying around, firing their machine guns at targets. And the drone itself is able to adjust itself to take into account the kickback from the shooting, so they keep it a constant target.
Oh, sure, that's a very solvable problem.
These guys are really proud of it. You should see these ads. It's all super. So there are people not only making a living doing all this stuff, but really getting off on it. They're creating. They're
Yeah.
An incredible cascade, which is getting faster and faster.
Yeah, it seems like there's, just like there's going to have to be a radical change in the economy from a growth economy to a, sustainable economy, and that a radical change where we are basically post-labor. We all just enjoy the fruits of and the distribution of the goods is the issue. But we thought that.
But currently, it's to be a roadblock. But if you talk, the pro AI people, AGI people like Kurzweil and others, they're much more optimistic in terms, not only abundance, but it'll be available to everyone.
Exactly, and we'll solve that problem. If we don't, blow ourselves up in the meantime. I guess that's always sort of been the horse race.
Well, there's so many things to talk about. There's also including the fact that we're probably already in a computer simulation.
Yes, of course, yeah.
Right, so here's how that argument goes. Now, this is really creepy. It's the Matrix, basically. We're already in the Matrix, only that we don't have any bodies. The Matrix has these human bodies stored away and their energy. The whole thing is, but there's nothing but the Matrix for us. There's no organic human out there that we can get back to.
Right.
So the argument goes like this: if we somehow make it as terrestrial intelligence to high tech, either we're going to blow ourselves up, we'll kill ourselves off, which is why some people say, Fermi, the great Italian physicist, asked, where is everybody? This is in the 50s. If life is everywhere, now those people who believe in UFOs is to say, hey, we have been contacted, but that's not official yet. We don't know what's really happening in there.
Right. I have a theory about that, by the way.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I do. And I think it's actually a reasonable theory based on, the evolution of consciousness. I think that any culture, I just postulate this. I don't know. But any culture that is advanced enough to contact us would be morally prohibited from doing so.
It's the Star Trek prime imperative, right?
Oh, there you go. Yes.
Right. They don't get with these primitive types.
Yeah, just like the way we are now with uncontacted tribes. Things seep through, but the official policy is to let them be
alone, right? Well, think about it this way. Now the guy who came up with this is Nick Bostrom, Bostrum. He's a Swedish-born philosopher who teaches at Oxford. Wrote a book on superintelligence 2 or 3 years ago, which is like the Bible right now for philosophers and a lot of computer scientists. And he says, look, if we either we blow ourselves up or we're probably already in a computer simulation. Now, why is that? Okay, here's his argument. Once we get to super high tech and can harness entire planets as computers, computing power which dwarfs anything we can even imagine now, okay, then it would be not a problem to have simulated worlds. World history with thousands of years and all this kind of stuff, and you'd be able to create conscious beings inside the computer who think that they are organic. And he says, look, what would be, assuming that is going to happen, why not? Then the odds of us being the only beings who are made of actual flesh and blood, the odds are probably we're not what we think we are.
It's almost a certainty all of a sudden.
We're already in a computer system. Get over it.
Hey, I guess you can't, or I can't prove that we're not.
Sim universe, and they have talk about all this stuff like, since it's all made up, I mean,
yeah,
you don't have to do the constant computing power for what's underneath the ground. It's just when somebody digs there, you put the stuff in there that's, that they're going to.
Right. Yeah, that's not a problem.
It's not even so. They could probably do all that anyway with the computer.
Right, and it's getting smarter all the time.
Getting better at it,
Yeah.
So that's just.
But see, this again is these are to me the fever dreams of people who think that human beings are all just material. They think we're already just material. They're materialists. Yeah, they don't have a sense of interiority any which way.
I agree, and I would say we talked about this.
They think we're robots already. Right.
Well, from their point of view, replacing human beings for some of these people, I think, for example, like Peter Tisch, he's the co-founder of was it PayPal? He's a guy supporting
Peter Thiel.
Thiel, right?
Yeah.
Trump supporter, libertarian. A lot of these guys, and I emphasize guys in Silicon Valley, and not just there, and other high-tech centers around the world. A lot of them are libertarian. Mm-hmm. They're not interested in, the liberal collective, whatever. They're more like Ayn Rand's, a great individual, going out there and taking over the universe.
Yeah.
Now, for some of these people like Thiel, he's already purchased his cryogenic backup. He's ready to be frozen as soon.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So when the time comes, he can be resuscitated.
Yeah. And
from his point of view, either basically, this is what a lot of these guys say. Either, what is all this? I'm getting these texts. There's two possibilities. Either human beings enormously magnified, like Kurzweil thinks, either we're going to take over the galaxy, or AGI will, and it won't be hemmed in by a biological body. I mean, how cool would it be, you see, to be made of silicon without all that messy carbon and flesh and organs and all this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so they have wild, what you might call scientific fantasies, many of these guys. And this is one of the problems with the demographic makeup of Silicon Valley. It's so male. It's alpha male. It's, and their attitude toward the human body is often somewhat contemptuous because they see it as so inefficient, such a short lifespan, pathetically limited brain, maybe 2 or 3 things you can keep track of. Come on. Yeah. They're talking about, something much better. They want to engineer our replacement.
Well, God bless them. But,
Let me ask you a question, though, about this. I wrote an essay about this some years ago called The Singularity. Is this the self-actualization of divine potential? In other words, is this the next move, evolutionary move? Now, what if that evolutionary move involved the possibility of generating within a computer program something analogous to human interiority? Now, it wouldn't be human. It would be computer interiority. It would be able to take into account itself, maybe even develop motives of its own. See, this is one of the motive problem is a big issue. Did you ever read the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
No, I never did.
It's fun. It's a good read. But anyway, there's a super intelligence computer in there, and he's bored. It's a he. He calls, he has a he personality, but he gets bored. He's already thought of everything. He can pretty much do whatever, but he's got no motivation. So the issue of motivation is big. Now, why are we motivated? For one thing, we want to survive. And we also, Maslowian hierarchy of needs. We also want to make a contribution and
Yes.
maximize our ability and increase
Create.
our relationships.
Contribute.
Yeah, make a difference. So we have motivation. And when you get real depressed, you aren't motivated. But those of us who can work against some tendency to be depressed, we can keep going with this. But how would you make a computer motivated, and would we want to?
Yeah, well, exactly. And for them, motivation in the human being is just a problem of meat. It's not really a problem of anything, any non-material reality.
Right.
And there's such a thing as, from an integral perspective, a spiritual perspective, there's such a thing as non-material reality. And then there's also just the absolute,
right.
None of that's online for these people who are doing this kind of theorizing. And again, the problem of creativity, motivation, love, these are all just, subjective artifacts of this machine that we are.
Right. That's why how should I put this? How are we going to get through this? Okay, are we going to end up making ourselves extinct, or are we going to end up with a society of people who are basically kind of human wreckage because they have no motivation? Think about that. Think about now for you and me. I'm 10 years older than you. Life is all about getting a job. Getting a career going, making something myself so I can make money.
I know. No, I think that's a really good point. When you don't have to do something. I've had a little bit of experience with that because, I haven't had to work for the last 20 years. Yeah. And, sometimes you don't want to get off the couch. And fortunately, I've got enough sort of other stuff online that I do get off the couch, but I wouldn't necessarily, give that option to a 15-year-old or me when I was 20. I don't know. I don't just, it's a problem.
Well, think about it. You and I know people who were born wealthy, and if their parents don't handle this right, their kids are in big trouble.
Exactly.
Because they're never going to do anything.
Yeah.
Your parents are worth, 100 million, 2 billion or whatever. Mm-hmm. You have no financial worries, and there's no particular hurry to do anything.
Yeah, but this is the move that we talk about even in integral theory of moving from a deficiency operating system to I want to express and create operating system. That's the first and second tier. And, for people who it's all about for all their ancestors, it's been about we have to work so we can live. Now, all of a sudden, it's a whole new set of motivations. They don't just appear out of nothing.
Right.
But they are there, and I do think we will find our way into it. We're going to have to.
We have to. But the problem is the telescoped nature of the change we're facing.
Oh, you're right.
Traditional cultures, could take some time. They could kind of get adapted to the airplane. Okay. Well, it took a long time to roll out to be any good, But with this stuff, it's like the next day there's some new thing that totally disrupts an existing.
Facebook came online, big time in 2007 or something like that.
Well, it was like the iPhone. That showed up around the same time.
That was essential. So,
and think of the alteration. And at this point, there are social psychologists and psychologists studying all this. I'm not familiar with their literature, but I would love for them to have an interiority built in, but of course, contemporary psychology is missing that.
Yeah.
So, first of all, what Silicon Valley needs is a lot more women who are attuned to their own embodiment, because you can have women who are the same type of libertarian, disembodied, although it's perhaps more difficult for many women to get into that space. Who would want to get into that space? But that feminine sensibility, however that's expressed, you can have it as a man. The attunement to corporeality. There's a lot of Gnosticism in Silicon Valley, which is contempt for the body.
Yeah.
Your thing that has to be shed so we can get really going on what we want, which is galactic mastery. That's a big goal, right?
Yeah.
What's the meaning of it? What is the purpose of all that? Now, so the second thing missing, in addition to respect and appreciation for the emotions, for the body, and all the stuff that's dissed by a lot of these Silicon Valley libertarians as too woo-woo, okay, is interiority. This is why integral theory, integral awareness needs to have some kind of presence, some kind of input.
Yeah.
Constantly raising the question of interiority.
Yes, that's right.
There's one guy that Ken is familiar with, this guy, David Chalmers. Do you know him?
You've mentioned him.
Yeah, he's an Australian philosopher of mind. He was here at CU Boulder 5 or 6 years ago. And he's tuned into all this stuff. His argument has been for a number of years. Let me back up with this. What philosophy was like in the 60s, 70s, and 80s when I was in graduate school in the 70s, consciousness was just not on the table. Because philosophy is dependent on science in a way for its empirical, we depend on physics.
All white right-hand quadrants.
Yeah, and the same thing with psychology. What was psychology then? Behaviorism.
Yep.
For which consciousness, subjectivity, first person, all that was no go.
Love, creativity,
Can't talk about that stuff because if you're going to be a scientific psychologist, you have to study human behavior from the third person perspective. It's watching what the humans do. It's not talking to them. Rather, you observe them talking to each other. That kind of thing. So for me, I was starved for this. I was starved for something like getting subjectivity, consciousness in. That's why I was attracted to European philosophers like Nietzsche and Heidegger and Sartre and all these people. They were not constrained by this. Now, behaviorism finally went out of fashion. And in the 80s and 90s, something like consciousness returned in philosophy. Now, this is a big deal because philosophers interact with people in computer science and so on, those who do this kind of thing. And Chalmers was one of the big guns. He said, look, you cannot give an account of what it's like to be a human being if you just rely on behaviorism and neuroscience.
Thank you.
The neuroscience studying the patterns in the brain, which is what all these guys are doing now, thinking they're finding out how the brain works, and this is good. No, it's not enough. And it's not enough to observe people's behavior. No, you have to explain how it's possible and what it's like for me to be me and experience talking to you and remembering things and feeling emotions and wishes and getting hungry. All that stuff is first person. And no one else can have access to it unless I tell them about it.
That's right.
Right? It's my sharing. That's what language enables, a sharing of interiority. Intersubjectivity follows. But see, he said, look, instead of regarding interiority, consciousness, first person, as some late arrival, like it showed up maybe with some higher mammals and human beings, okay? Otherwise, everything, he said, no. It's as something like interiority, however meager it is. It starts all the way down at the bottom. It's basic as space, time, matter, energy, interiority. It's one of the basic elements of reality. Then you don't have a problem with how it could be. Sure. But if you posit that here's the thing, then you have to have a way of talking about it that's not just reducible to the brain.
Right.
That's where
the brain may be an antenna for it. The brain may be in some ways analogous to it, but it's not reducible to it.
Not reducible to it. And that's in his insistence, he called that the hard problem of consciousness.
Yes.
That's where that phrase came from. And that's where it seems to me that a lot of these computer geeks are hung up. Now, in Kurzweil's book, I recommend everyone read his book. It's 10 years old, but it's still great. The Singularity is Near. He has
the singularity is when computers are smart as humans.
Right, and that there's a takeoff.
Yeah.
They start reprogramming themselves until they become millions.
Okay. Right. All right.
So the singularity, think about this. It is a unique event which alters history. So that's when he talks about the singularity. Our history will never be the same. And it's almost, sometimes I have this feeling, how when you're walking through the park and suddenly you see the leaves start blowing around and stuff. I feel like you can see the leaves are moving. You see, they're being drawn towards something. It's not just they're being pushed. They're There's an attraction. This is like that strange attractor. The future is now pulling us toward it, okay? And we're not able to stop it because there's no government in charge of anything.
You're scaring me again.
Well, this is what's happening. I just think there's no way around this.
Yeah.
Unless we blow ourselves up, which is a possibility.
Well, I suppose that's, yeah, can't rule that out either, huh?
Meteor hitting us, or, but if things continue at this exponential rate, just look, think back how primitive the iPhone was 10 years ago. And now with the X phone or whatever they call it. I mean, it's like, and same thing with these social media.
Yeah.
Every day they get better. Every day new developments take place. They're put out there in the market. They're suddenly are being consumed. They alter basic human patterns of relationship. Mm-hmm. Let me give you an example of how I saw this film, another hour-long program produced in Australia about artificial intelligence. One of the key players was this truck driver, faced with the prospect of self-driving big rigs. Right? He's been driving trucks for 30 years, he's in his 50s. He was skeptical, but it's just no doubt it's going to happen. Right? And it'll take a while to roll out because there's a lot of capital investment in trucks which don't do that. Right. You saw Elon, and he presented his new truck a week or two ago, right? Mm-hmm. I think the guy has enough money to do a prototype big rig.
He's the first person in history to start 4 separate billion-dollar companies. I mean, he's astonishing. He's a historical figure.
Very worried about AGI.
I know he is.
He's in that world, and he sees what.
But I think he's also a materialist. That he could be really smart and really effective, and still miss that piece of the puzzle.
There is now. Ken Wilber is pretty depressed right now, but he sees this as. He doesn't see a magic transformation coming about this, but doesn't mean that there's not going to be. But we don't know how to get there. How do we bring that into the conversation in a way that allows for a finer, a better form of AGI?
Yeah.
But in any case, so in addition to this truck driver faced with potential. What's the word? Being made redundant, as the English say. In other words, you're fired. There was this young gal. I guess she was in her 20s. She was in some law clerk program, in Australia. I think she had just about finished, and so they had invited her to kind of compete with this guy who had a computer. So in about 2.5 minutes, he completes this whole. Answers this fairly complicated question, but which is one that's just pretty standard. And she's sitting there with her own computer because he had this whole program. She's like on step 3 of 20. He's done. And he came up with the right answer. Now, she was kind of crestfallen because what's her future going to be? Since she was counting on linear growth, not exponential growth, she thought it would be enough that she'd learn how to use the computer and access stuff. But when you have a computer next to you with algorithms far more powerful than anything you can come up with, what's going to happen to that? Now, they did human beings, let's face it, we are faced with change that we're not ready for. 70%, I read this recently, they did a survey. About 2/3 of people believe that a whole lot of jobs are going to go to robots and AGI and stuff in the coming 5-10 years, but not their job. They're all sure that nobody, robot, could.
I'm going to farm out the Daily Evolver to a robot. That does it. I'm going to go voluntarily redundant.
They have sports writing robots. They have all kind of that write, stories about development.
I don't know if I'm going to get the same transmission from that, but
there's something fun about human beings that they don't have.
Yeah. I mean, once again, we're free to be, whatever.
Well,
we'll just be so creative and so in each other's hair. We'll figure something out.
Nothing, but there's another example. One of these guys 2 or 3 years ago made a presentation to. What is it? Goldman Sachs to senior executives, maybe 20, not the very top 10, but say right underneath them, okay? And this guy was making this pitch about AGI and what's going to happen. And he said later, he said they didn't realize that within a few years, half of those people won't be there.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a bumpy ride. There's no doubt about it. But I think we'll,
Well, think about Marx. This is one way of putting this, thinking about this. What did Marx say was going to happen with capitalism? He loved capitalism. He loved capitalism. He didn't like the temporary effects of it, but the fierce competition that was at work in it would produce tremendous breakthroughs in industrial capacity, such that at a certain point, we wouldn't have to work anymore. Labor, especially alienated labor, would be over, and you could play the guitar in the morning and fish in the afternoon, as he said, although he was actually totally clueless about what such a society would look like. So
yeah,
we're about to enter, if things go the best possible way, a period of such abundance and clean abundance, probably figuring out a lot of environmental issues, and but then what? What do we do with our time besides smoking dope or getting drunk or playing computer games or Facebook? I mean, is that it? We'll become superfluous, even to ourselves. What?
Well, I think
I'm just asking.
We move from a world of where we're obsessed with material wealth. That's been since day one. Is getting so we're safe and we're healthy and we have enough calories and we can stay warm in the winter and all of that good stuff. And then we move to the subtle realm, which is the world of thought and ideas and, that kind of creativity. I think that's a whole new world of the ways that we can interrelate with each other. And then there's the spiritual realm. And we'll be doing, I don't know, levitating. I don't know what we'll be doing, something like that.
That's a best case scenario.
Yeah, that's the best case scenario.
That it would be so. Yeah. But even I think about it this way. Think about how many people cannot make it in ordinary society. Okay. And think about the people whose lives are so structured around their everyday going to work, and who don't yet have the wherewithal to reinvent themselves.
No.
What would it take socioculturally to have a basic human reinvention program? And who would run it?
No, we're going to have to get good at that. And, just as with modernity and when we lose God, we become sort of alienated. That's the sort of disease of modernity. And I would say the disease of post-modernity is depression. Yeah. And I think that there is, that's ongoing. We're going to have, because if you don't have anything to do, you're depressed. I mean, that's just the way it is. And we're going to have to figure that one out. And like you said, at a breakneck speed while we're walking and chewing gum at the same time. So,
well, look back at the Great Depression. The genius of Roosevelt, and his people was they realized the extent of despair.
Yeah.
National depression, literally.
Yeah. Yeah, really. The Great Depression.
Right. Everyone
had an interior, quality to it.
He made up all these make-work programs.
Yeah, exactly. And, we've got all kinds of reclamations to do in this world. Who knows? We'll have service corporate, the service corps, education. I don't know. Dancing.
Right. So what we have to, that's, I should have put that.
And Michael, we got to wrap up here in about 2 or 3 minutes too. So
that seems to me, that very topic is really rich. Okay. What would it look like? What kind of program, what kind of process could be envisioned and thought about now that could start to be rolled out? One of the things that happened, I'll just close with this, in I think it was Dayton or Youngstown, one of these old, in Ohio, these industrial cities. Now they've got these big spaces where people come in and make things with brick and mortar and board and metal. Uh, and so that they're creating a workplace in which they can be creative. And so it hands-on. This whole interest in, what do they call it?
Steampunk.
Yeah, this whole interest in the tangible as opposed to the digital, the analog.
Yes.
That's an expression of this yearning for hands.
Yes.
This is what Mark said. It was the brain and hand, that the thumb, that allowed us to become human.
Yeah.
To the extent to which our hands are doing nothing but hitting keyboard, it's pretty boring for a lot.
Right on.
Get back to hands-on humanity.
Yeah.
This new context.
Right on. Well, I'm glad we got that all figured out and straightened out.
At least we know what we need to be doing.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's certainly lots to talk about here, and I'd love to check in on you regularly. But this is, helps lay out the land, and see if we could bring a evolutionary view to this that's includes more. So
here.
Give it a good stab.
Including interiority.
Exactly.
Right, and the body.
And the body, yes, exactly. So thank you, Michael Zimmerman, and thank you, everybody, for listening and watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Jeff. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.